Good evening, y'all. It's Brendan Dzwierzynski here with you from a chilly and, progressively more freezing David Booth Kansas Memorial Stadium in Lawrence tonight, where the Kansas Jayhawks dropped their senior day regular season home finale in blowout fashion to the Texas Longhorns, 55-14. The worst loss for KU since all the way back on October 31st of last year. It's been over a year since KU has been blown out to this degree. It's obviously been a very competitive season, a very successful season for a lot of reasons. I told you it was very cold out here. A lot of successes this season, however, this certainly not one of them. And it's the first time this year that KU has really been blown out in a loss as well. Last week they lose by 15 to Texas Tech, but they did have a chance late in the game to come back and tie it before a costly turnover on their own side of the field. A couple of one-score losses, or at least just on the shorter side of two scores, but not at all the case in this one. And it was the Texas running game that completely obliterated the Kansas defense, really from the very jump in this one. Bijan Robinson was absolutely tremendous for the Longhorns. 25 carries, 243 yards, and 4 touchdowns in the game for Texas. And he actually had a fifth one he scored back in the second quarter. It was wiped off due to a penalty, and Texas still ended up scoring on the drive. So a huge day for Bijan Robinson. They also, Texas being they, got over 100 yards, 108 of them for backup running back Jonathan Brooks. That is just the second time in Texas history, the storied history of Texas football, they have had a 200-yard rusher and a 100-yard rusher in the same game. So obviously the KU defense struggling mightily in this one, just no answer at all for the Texas running game. Texas throwing the ball didn't do a whole lot in this contest. Starting quarterback Quinn Ewers, 12 of 21, 107 yards, ended up with 1 touchdown, no interceptions. I mean, not an especially great day for the transfer freshman quarterback, but in the end, it was all about the running game, frankly. And I honestly believe this. If Texas had decided to not throw the ball a single time in this game, they may have ended up with even more than 55 points, which, by the way, it is important to note, is the most points that KU has given up all year in either non-conference or in conference play. As for the Jayhawks offense, the game started with some good vibes, with Jalen Daniels returning to the lineup for the first time since he was injured in the second quarter against TCU all the way back on October 8th. Unfortunately, though, and Lance Leipold alluded to this during the press conferences leading up to the game this week, he was not going to be 100%, will not be 100% for whatever games he ends up playing in the rest of the way. And while he had okay numbers, he ended up with a lot of stats, both yardage-wise and touchdowns-wise, in garbage time. And it really just appeared, and this solely speaking on behalf of the eye test, but it really did feel like Daniels was laboring a lot in this game. His final numbers ends up 17 out of 26 passing, 230 yards, 2 touchdowns. Did have a 55-yard throw that was very impressive, completing it to Quentin Skinner down the field. In fact, just on this end of the field right behind me. But again, really looked like he was laboring throughout the game, still dealing with that injured shoulder that he suffered back in week 6 against TCU. And maybe the biggest thing for KU in this game, beyond the inability to throw the ball, was the somewhat lack of production, relatively speaking, for Devin Neal, who over the past 2 weeks, if my math was correct, had 532 yards of offense from scrimmage in the games against Oklahoma State and then against Texas Tech. 190 yards on the ground last week, 224 the week before that with 110 yards to the air as well. He was held to just 50 yards from scrimmage in this game, 51 on the ground, and also caught a pass for a loss of a yard as well. So not being able to get him going at all in the game. The Texas defensive line played really well. The KU offensive line struggled a little bit. Both Jalen Daniels and, for a few snaps, Jason Bean, when he got in late in the game, they really had a lot of pressure in their face throughout the contest. And in the end, it is the running game and the defensive size and speed of Texas that made the difference in this one, 55-14. So with that, KU wraps up its home schedule. 2 more games. There will be a bowl game coming up later on in the month of December, which is obviously a huge accomplishment for this KU team, even with the unfortunate backdrop of finally having a blowout loss this season. And of course, one more regular season game to come as well. It'll be next Saturday in prime time from the Bill Snyder Family Stadium, the Bill, if you will, in Manhattan for the Sunflower Showdown, or in a shout out to our good friend Jesse Newell of the Kansas City Star, the Clash on the Caw. K-State coming off of a big win over West Virginia on the road in Morgantown earlier on here on November 19th. So that is coming up next week. But until then, one more time, your final score from Lawrence. It's Texas 55, KU just 14, both touchdowns in the fourth quarter. That drops KU to 6-5 overall in the year and 3-5 in Big 12 play. We'll be recapping this game, the K-State game from Saturday, and so much more from the college football and NFL weekends coming up Monday on 580 WIBW, both on Mic'd Up with Jake and Fulton from noon to 3, and then on 580 Sports Talk from 3 to 6 with myself and my co-host Dan Lucero. But until Monday, for the Sports on 580 team and from David Booth Kansas Memorial Stadium in Lawrence, I'm Brendan Dzwierzynski.